Hello and welcome to my Microsoft Azure Stack application service resource provider demo. Today we're going to deploy a simple web app using the application service provider backed by an SCM from my GitHub repo and some pre-staged web applications. Before we start, we have a look at my administrative portal. So if I go to my administrative portal, we can see here that I have already deployed the app service resource provider. So configuration-wise, the app service provider is provisioned with a file share. The file share is used to store the websites, also as having the FTP access. There's a publishing DNS and a parking page that I could use in order for my application deployment. From the from the source control configuration, I have provisioned my GitHub account, so you have to set up an application key that talks with a client secret in order to retrieve the repo information from my GitHub. In terms of roles, I configured controller and management server role with a single instance, as well as the publisher. For front ends and web workers, I'm using 2/3 instances for the workers. So if I go to the worker tiers, you can see I have a shared worker backed by an A1 and small worker tiers backed by standard A1, A2, or A3 machines with 3 instances /2 instances. They are lined up in SKUs. In the family free for F, D for shared, and S for standard, and brought up to pricing tiers, though I have pricing tiers from the free one up to the dynamic one, and we will start with the D1 and later on upgrade to a S1. I have no custom software installed, so we can close out here now and sign into my user's portal using a different browser. So I'm using IE for the user and Chrome for the administrative portal. I'm signing on with my with a tenant user that sits on my AD tenant, which is AZS user 1, that I'm also using to provision demos later on. If I go to subscriptions in that user, he currently has no subscriptions, so I could add a subscription from here, or go to the dashboard and click on Get a Subscription. I call this subscription just simple sub1 for my first subscription, and I select an offer, which is the application service offer. Once I click on create, it takes a few moments and I need to refresh my browser to see this new subscription. Now my new subscription is here, and I could immediately deploy some application services. So if I click on new, web and mobile, I could create an API app, a function app, or a web app, and some pre-configured stuff like a CMS, Django, WordPress sites, and a DNN platform, or the application service plan itself, which is required in order to provision application, because that's the point where I scale up and scale down my service provider. I'm not going to use the website right now to deploy stuff. I'm using a PowerShell script that I have created, which is essentially 2 basic scripts. One is my Bootstrap script, and the Bootstrap script is just signing on my user to the Azure Stack, sets the directory to my root modules that I'm using for PowerShell, sets the endpoints that I'm going to use, and my tenant ID. It also creates some global variables that can be picked up from other scripts. So I'm starting a new PowerShell session right now. And call my script, which is sitting in the Azure Stack TSC user 99 bootstrap user. Once I put in my credentials, I'm storing the credentials, connect to the endpoints, read the current subscriptions and all that stuff in order to run scripts right now from here. The next script I'm going to run is the AppService demo script. The AppService demo script essentially creates a plan. Let's jump up here. Per default, it's called My App, but we're using a different app. So first it reads my subscription, sets the template URL, which is a quick start template I've created that creates a plan and the hosting environment. Defaults queue code D1, it's a shared queue, and it's creating the server app farm resource group. It registers the provider and then creates the deployment. So I'm going to run that script now. I am giving this an app name called AzureStack guy, which will be the endpoint for my application. So first of all, as the resource provider is not registered, the first thing that's be done in for my subscription is registering the resource provider. This would take a few moments. Typically, this takes like 30 to 40 seconds before that provider is registered. Once the provider is registered, it starts the application, the deployment of the resource group. So we start already going to resource groups here, stick that window to this side, and wait for the deployment to happen. Have this one up here. So the registration of the provider needs to be done the first time I'm subscribing to an AppService plan. Once this is done, this doesn't need to be done anymore. So once the provider is registered, it creates a resource group called AzureStack guy and starts the deployment. So if we go in here, we can see actually the deployment taking place. It deploys the application service plan and the application environment. Now it's done with the configuration. So the plan is created, the app is created. It's a local application which uses a shared queue as a D1. So if we click on my deployment and make this full size, we have a new app service deployed. We could immediately go to this website, which is the default Azure Stack website for the application service. And it says right now you can use Git FTP or your favorite deployment tools to publish some website. Now, it also comes with some cool tools like Kudu. Kudu, essentially, people might know it already from public Azure, is a tool to manage website deployments and application deployments. You can see here the site folder is C home. It is a temp path. I can control source control all files, and I could also start a debug console, which in this case is PowerShell. And type in here get process, where I can list all the processes currently running for that instance. I also could browse to the directory in that site, like the publishing root, which is the hosting service.html. This is the site that we have seen earlier, and the console just continues with that. I'm closing out of Kudu because there's another cool thing I would show you, which is the integrated app service editor. So for app service, it comes with an integrated editor that's pretty similar to Visual Studio Code that allows you to do in-application edits while your application is up and running. So if I go to my www root publishing, I have the hosting start, and this is the default site that we just have seen. We can make some edits here, and let's go to the English one and make it demo, and then we can click on save, and it's done. If I refresh that page, I think I'm in the, okay, I was in the wrong, sorry for that. It was only the title. I wanted to edit the header. And it should be done immediately. So this is like an in-application editing, which is a pretty cool feature that's coming with Azure Stack application service provider, as well as public Azure right now. So, however, what we are going to do right now is we are deploying from source control, which means I have to set up my source control in deployment options. So I have already configured my my GitHub using the API key. And now I have to select my GitHub. I'm using the personal as organization. I could configure also, I'm connected to Pivotal Partner Solutions, EMC Code in here, other accounts for that. In there, I'm going to use the AppService HTML5 demo, which is a pre-configured demo I've done, and I'm using the master branch right now for a good reason. Clicking on OK here, and it starts to setting up the deployment source. If I go back to deployment options, it takes a moment. Currently no deployments found. Now it needs to refresh. And now it's fetching the actual website from my GitHub. So the initial fetch may take a while in this case, because it has also some branches aligned to it that we are going to use later on. Just click forwards and backwards, and we can see it's done. If we now go to our website and refresh it, you can see now this is a little website with some cartoons on it and their Twitter accounts, which is essentially some members of our Azure Stack global team. Now, if I want to start another deployment slot, which is essentially for this app service, I want to start like a dev site, I can go in deployment slots and add one. However, in my current plan, there's no slot available because I'm only using the shared plan. What I could do now is I go to scale up the app service plan and choose a different pricing tier. And the pricing tier I'm going to choose right now is S1 pricing tier. This allows for 5 web app staging slots, so I could stage different versions of my web application. Now it's updating the service plan, and once it's done, I can start with new deployment slots. It might be not available from the first try, so eventually we need to refresh here. And it takes a few moments, and then we have the possibility to add a deployment slot. Now, the new deployment slot, I will call it dev. There are some configuration source options. I could clone everything right now from my production side, but I don't want to do it. I click on OK because I want to set up a different branch later on in my deployment options. So you can see here, I right now have a environment called Azure Stack Guy Dev, and the website is the Azure Stack Guy Dev website. When I click on Open, it opens an external website. It might take a few moments, and you see standard default app service. What we're going to do right now is for this one, we also set up the deployment options. And within the deployment options, choosing again my GitHub, choose my HTML5 demo, but rather than using the master branch, I'm selecting the develop branch and click on OK. Now it takes again a few moments in order to sync that branch. If we go back to deployment slots, you can see we have the production that's already running, and in the options, it's fetching the information. Now I'm going back to refresh, and we see right now it has updated the website from GitHub. If I refresh that website, it will show me the development branch of this website. Okay. So you see here, I just changed the style sheet of that website. So it's essentially the same site, but I changed the style sheet to have it a little bit more responsive in that case. What I could also do right now is I could do, I can go to a code editor and say essentially that this is the very awesome team in the zoo. We are happy to work on Azure Stack. Click on Save. And this is my external code editor, which runs on my local machine. Click on a demo change. And sync this to my Azure Stack, to my GitHub repo. Again, takes a few moments. Not the fastest line today from my home office. And it's done. I could go back to my source control in my Azure Stack and do a sync. And again, I have to manually refresh, and you see the demo change has taken place. If I now go to that site, it should change. This is the very awesome team in the zoo to the new text we put in. We are happy to work on Azure Stack, so this one is changed. If I now think that this website is really good, I could go to my GitHub and transform it or merge it to the master branch so that I will have the master branch. But what I also could do from my deployment slots, I could swap slots. So I could swap my dev, my production, my source dev to my production and click OK. After swapping the deployment slots, it may take a few moments until my new website or until the websites have changed. So if I'm going back to my app services, go on the AzureStack guy, allowing it some time to load, and I go on the appservice.local.azurestack.external. You see that's the new page. It has just changed. It's the new one with we're happy to work on the zoo, which is the edit that we earlier did. So there's some other cool options like backup. So if you're going to build your modern application within your digital transformation, there's no way you're going to use a traditional backup stuff. So what we can set up here is we can configure a backup service that is scheduled. And for this, we need to configure some storage. What we can use right now is other, which is my local Azure Stack or an external Azure site, where we just type in a storage account name. And the storage account name I'm going to use here is my personal Azure Stack account. So the account I'm going to use is a special storage account that I set up for Azure Stack. It's called Azure Stack Backup, and the blob container name is AzureStack Guy. Last but not least, I have to type in my key, and once this is in, I click on OK, and my backup is configured. Now I can start a scheduled backup with backup frequency, for instance, here of 1 day. This depends on my plan, and the default retention is 30 days. If there would be an application, I could include my database application within the backup. I could include this in backup as well. I click on Save, and the backup configuration is configured. The next backup will start on the scheduled date. If I click on refresh, we can see the backup is currently in progress. So it takes a while, a few moments until the first backup is done. However, I have already done some recent backups of my other demos. So if I go to my public site, I can show you this within a moment. Which is essentially here, my backup containers. If we go down to Azure Stack Guy, you can see the backups for the certain point in times. So that was it for the Azure Stack resource provider setup for AppService. Hope you tune in soon. Thank you and bye-bye.